The crystal glass shattered against the marble fireplace, spraying Chardonnay across the hearth like a sudden, violent rainstorm. An abrupt silence descended upon the grand ballroom of the Sterling estate, the festive murmur of the annual charity gala ceasing as if a switch had been flipped. Every eye in the room, 100 pairs belonging to the city's most powerful figures, was fixed on me. "Are you calling me a liar in my own home?" Julian Sterling's voice was low, yet it cut through the silence with the chilling precision of a scalpel. He stood, his towering frame silhouetted by the roaring fire, the epitome of old money rage. The issue wasn't the spilled drink, a result of his own daughter bumping into me. The issue was that I had, moments before, quietly corrected his boastful claim to an investor about the structural integrity of his new downtown skyscraper. "I am saying the latest geological survey suggests the foundation requires reinforced caissons, not the standard pilings you've used," I stated, my voice even. "My name is Leo. I'm a structural engineer, and for 3 years I have been married to Clara, Julian Sterling's only daughter." Julian's eyes, cold and gray as the winter sea, narrowed. "You are an over-educated mechanic who draws lines on paper. You will stand here and apologize for embarrassing me, or you will get out." I looked for Clara. She stood frozen near the string quartet, her face a mask of horrified shame. Shame for me. "Leo, please," she mouthed, her eyes pleading. "Just say you were mistaken." Those words were a betrayal deeper than any public humiliation. For years, I had endured the condescending remarks, the jokes about my modest firm, the constant implication that I was a fortune hunter. I had believed our love was a fortress. I now saw it was a house of cards. I turned back to Julian, whose cruel smirk told me this was a meticulously planned execution. He didn't want an apology. He wanted a capitulation. He wanted to prove to his world and to his daughter that I could be broken. Looking around the silent room, at the bankers and politicians who orbited Julian's son, I saw no allies. They were merely spectators at a Roman circus, waiting for the emperor's thumb to turn. I felt the familiar weight of being the outsider, the man who built things with his hands and his mind in a world that valued only what was inherited. A strange calm settled over me. "No," I said, my voice clear and firm. "I will not apologize for the truth." Then I turned and walked toward the grand entrance, the silence behind me broken by a wave of shocked whispers. I didn't slam the door. I didn't offer a parting shot. I simply left. They believed they had exiled me. They had no idea that I had just been handed the key to their destruction. Driving back to the small suburban house Clara and I called home, the scene replayed in my mind. It wasn't just about tonight. It was about the slow erosion of my marriage and my principles. Julian Sterling was a man who saw the world as his personal chessboard. He didn't build a real estate empire. He conquered it, using his father's name and a complete disregard for rules that governed lesser men. When Clara and I first fell in love, he dismissed me as a working-class diversion. When we married, he began his campaign. It was never overt. It was 1,000 tiny cuts. He'd gift us a down payment on a lavish apartment we couldn't afford, knowing I would refuse. He'd criticize my lack of ambition for not taking dangerous shortcuts to grow my small engineering firm. Clara, who had once admired my integrity, began to echo his words. "You're too rigid, Leo," she'd say. "Business is about being flexible." But I knew his flexibility was just a euphemism for corruption. The true beginning of the end was 6 months ago. At a dinner celebrating a new hospital wing he had funded, Julian publicly mocked a structural flaw in a city bridge, a project my firm had consulted on. He lied, exaggerating a minor, corrected issue to make me look incompetent. Clara said nothing, her silence a ringing endorsement of her father's cruelty. That night, I began to prepare. Not for revenge, but for the inevitable collision. As an engineer who had worked on dozens of municipal and private projects, I knew the city's hidden pathways. I knew the overworked inspectors, the underpaid archivists, the honest public servants Julian considered invisible. They were the people who knew where the structural skeletons were buried. I started digging, not with malice, but with a professional's focus. I spent weekends in the city planning archives, cross-referencing blueprints with issued permits and material inspection reports for Sterling's projects over the last decade. My engineering knowledge allowed me to see what others couldn't: a pattern. A pattern of falsified soil reports, substandard materials signed off on by the same two inspectors, and structural load calculations that were mathematically impossible. 2 weeks ago, an old contact from the city assessor's office, a man Julian had ruined years prior, gave me the final piece. Proof that Julian was systematically bribing a key official to approve his projects without proper oversight. It wasn't just about money. It was about public safety. Several of his newer buildings, including the one I'd mentioned tonight, were potential death traps. Now, sitting in my quiet study, the shattered trust of my marriage echoing in my ears, I knew the Cold War had just turned hot. I opened my laptop to a secure folder labeled Project Bedford. Inside were neatly organized subfolders: geotechnical discrepancies, compromised inspection audits, irregular payouts. There was one last folder, labeled Contingency. It contained my nuclear option. As my mouse hovered over it, my phone buzzed. It was Clara. "Leo, you have to come back. Dad is furious. He's been on the phone with his lawyers. He said he's found things out about you. He's going to ruin you." Her voice was trembling with a fear I'd never heard before. I smiled grimly. Julian Sterling thought he had ammunition against me. He was about to find out what it felt like to stand in the path of a controlled demolition. 20 minutes later, I walked back into the lion's den. The party was over. Julian was waiting for me in his cavernous library, a thick file on the polished mahogany desk between us. Clara stood beside him, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "I knew you were a snake from the day I met you," Julian spat, forgoing any pleasantries. He opened the file, spilling photographs across the desk. They were of me, meeting with my source from the assessor's office, taking pictures of documents in the city archives. Spying on my family. Did you think I wouldn't find out? Clara looked at me, her expression wounded. "Leo, why? Why would you do this to us?" "To you?" I asked. my voice dangerously soft. This started when your father declared war on my reputation and my livelihood. I simply chose to arm myself. "You are a parasite!" Julian roared, slamming his hand on the desk. "You married my daughter to get close to my business, and now you're trying to blackmail me." He then laid out his masterstroke. His private investigators had discovered that 5 years ago my fledgling firm had underpaid its taxes by a few $1,000s due to a clerical error, one I had since rectified with the IRS. But he had documents he claimed could frame it as deliberate fraud. "My lawyers are filing a formal complaint tomorrow," he said, his voice dripping with venom. "But that's not all." He explained his influence with the state licensing board. "By the time I'm done, you won't be able to get a permit to build a doghouse in this state. Your career will be over." It was all there. The motive, the execution. He would destroy me, and then console his grieving daughter by introducing her to a more suitable husband, one who would merge with the Sterling Empire. I looked at Clara, searching for a spark of the woman I married. I found none. "Leo," she whispered, "maybe it's for the best. We're just too different." She had given up. That was the moment the last of my restraint vanished. I was no longer fighting for my marriage. I was fighting for every honest person Julian had ever crushed. "Are you finished?" I asked calmly. Julian recoiled, surprised by my lack of panic, because now it's my turn. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the desk. I opened an email draft. The recipient was Amelia Vance, the most feared investigative journalist at the Times. The subject line read, "Evidence the Sterling Tower and the risk of catastrophic structural failure." I swiped to a file, showing them a detailed 3D model. "While you were digging for 5-year-old tax receipts, I was doing some engineering work. Your new skyscraper, the one you boasted about tonight? My calculations show a 70% chance of foundation failure in a moderate seismic event. You used substandard steel and falsified the inspection reports. You didn't just cut corners, Julian. You built a time bomb in the middle of the city." Julian's face went white. Clara gasped. "This phone contains my entire investigation," I continued. "Copies are stored on multiple encrypted servers. If anything happens to me, or if you proceed with your threats, this email gets sent. The story won't just be about financial fraud. It will be about you knowingly endangering thousands of lives for profit. It will be about corporate manslaughter." Julian lunged for the phone, but I was faster. "Don't bother. It's just a copy." The silence in the library was absolute, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock. "You wouldn't dare," Julian choked out, his voice a hoarse whisper. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. "You've spent your life believing you are untouchable. You build monuments to your own ego. The difference between us, Julian, is that I build things to last. I build them to be safe. And I will not stand by while you put innocent people at risk." I turned to face him. "You will retract your threats. You will issue a public statement tomorrow announcing that Sterling Development is halting the tower project for an independent structural review, and you will never contact me or my firm again. You have until 9 a.m. As I left the Sterling mansion for the second and final time, I knew I hadn't just won a battle. I had started a war for the soul of the city. and I was ready to see it through to the end.